welcome back to Social Confoes. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world watching this live. And Diego, I added a new channel. So for the first time ever, we're going live on Film TV, and I'm really excited to see. And maybe next week we'll talk about how
Oh
that
yeah, I
went.
just noticed that definitely. But yeah, next week we'll talk about it. But quickly, just short, what's FIM? Because I've never actually heard about it,
Film
and you
TV
just
is
added
a
it.
live streaming platform on the Hive blockchain.
Yeah, we talked all
Yeah,
about Hype 2 weeks ago. So
yeah.
if you missed that, check that out. Our conversation with John Olson, all about Hive. But today we're going back local. We're going back, to the corporate world, to marketing, to entrepreneurship. Today we have actually someone who, for the last time, I think maybe over 10 years ago, I saw her when we graduated from. I wasn't even there for my own graduation from high school, actually. But
Wow.
yeah, we were in high school together, Vrij Atheneum, and yeah, she went to the Netherlands to further her study, and since then has been started a career there, and occasionally came back to Suriname. Um, on vacation, but I've been following her on LinkedIn, on the socials, and seeing the developments. And I thought it was interesting the journey she took, like working for a big company, and then now she's actually starting her own thing. I actually saw a few weeks or months ago there was an event here with the virtual Handelsmissie. So lots of stuff happening, and I'd like to welcome to the stage Chandel Hermelijn. Chandel, welcome to Social Convos.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Love the intro.
So I have to ask quickly. You both graduated from Atta.
hmm
Yes, you're also
Okay.
actually a
Yeah,
student from the
I've
Atheneum.
yes, I'm also from Atta, and it's funny because yeah, you both started when I already graduated. So it's kind of confronting in a way that I'm getting old, but also like assuring that when you get older, age really doesn't matter that much anymore. But it's very it's very confronting that you both went to Atta after I already graduated. And there's actually just about 6 years in between as well. So that's pretty fun. But Chanel, welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
we have to ask the simple question: what do you miss most about Suriname?
I think the weather, the food, and also of course family. My parents both live here. I also have some dear friends and other people that are close to my heart here. So it's the people, the food, and the weather, of course, because in the Netherlands it's unpredictable and cold. So yeah.
Have you gotten used to the weather at any point? Can you say like you're more prepared for the winter than you were when you came to the Netherlands?
Well, I must say, I also think it's kind of shifting towards wearing the right stuff. So if you have the right clothing, which oftentimes doesn't really feel or look great, but it really works. So the my latest kind of weatherproof purchase was a raincoat. So it really blocks out the wind as well, because in Holland sometimes it's not really cold, but when the wind hits, it's like whoa. So I think those investments in kind of good clothing really help to kind of get used to the weather. Yeah, so I'm not really used to it, but I guess I'm dressing better and kind of knowing and sensing a bit more what to wear. So yeah.
That's really interesting that the weather, the seasonal changes has made you more conscious on, how you dress, how you present yourself. Because one,
Mhm.
it has to be practical, and two, it still has to look good. Especially working in a professional sense in the corporate
Mhm.
world, and also in a casual sense, I'd say. But yeah, let's dive straight
Definitely.
into that, I guess. After high school, basically, you went
Mhm.
straight away to the Netherlands, basically the traditional roadmap. You go for your
Mhm.
bachelor's, and then you went straight for your master's. Can you tell us a bit about that trajectory for you? Was it all planned out, having that traditional mindset, like getting your degrees, getting a job at a big company? Was it all planned,
Yeah.
or was it like
Yeah,
during
so
the journey?
that's exactly how it went. So basically, when I graduated here, and I think for most people graduating here, and when you have the opportunity to study abroad, it's kind of like, okay, you go study abroad and you become a doctor or a lawyer or something, like really not here, but like immediately on the top of the chart in terms of education. So I also felt that pressure, but I must say I wasn't really focused on what I wanted. I also had a strange mix of courses during my high school time. So I was kind of it was kind of a mix between more the I did have some physics and some advanced math, but then also I had history as well, and I also had economics. So it was kind of like a weird mix, because I kind of never really wanted to choose. I never really knew what I wanted. So when I needed to make the choice to study abroad, I was like, shoot, what do I want? What can I do? And I knew I didn't want to go into the medical field for some reason. I really didn't feel the need to go that bad. I also didn't feel like anything um, in the law would be something suitable for me, because you have to read a lot, and that is also something that wouldn't suit me. So that's how I kind of rolled into business administration and kind of that more corporate route. I was contemplating on doing also psychology, because for some reason that really had my interest, but I just really didn't know what I wanted. So I kind of also went on the path of just following the quote unquote expectations of people around me, but also just in general. I think our society, and kind of the expectation of many people here, many parents here in that time. So really focused on my study. I applied, I got in, and then I was just like, okay, need to finish my studies, and just only focused on getting it done. And then I came into kind of a phase where I had to choose again what I wanted to do after my bachelor. So that was also kind of a stressful period of deciding what I wanted. And actually, one of the first really conscious choices that really had an impact on kind of my future. So um, I must say, in that time, the choice to, because I did a master's in finance and investments, and the choice was really a bit more practical rather than something I really enjoyed. Because I had a Surinamese passport and Surinamese visa, also staying in Holland. So I knew I wanted to kind of get some experience, work experience. So getting a job in that time was kind of my main focus, and that was the hot um, area to find a job in, finance and investment. So that's why I did that master, but still always focused on just the broader picture, and wanting to learn a lot and not really wanting to specialize in anything specific. So that's why I kind of dived into consulting, and not specifically into one type of thing, but really the broader sense of consulting. Yeah.
So would you say you're more left brain or right, means left being the more analytical, and right
Hmm.
being more the creative, emotional feeling stuff? Because you made a lot of more practical choices based on
Hmm.
what I've heard there.
Yes, definitely. So I I think I'm just now, or just in recent years, I think after I quit my job in consulting, I've been more in tune with kind of what I feel, what I want, more the creative side, and more just letting things be. Up until that point, I really had a script for myself, which I wasn't really necessarily aware of. I didn't really have a list of, okay, this is what I need to do, but I didn't really give myself the freedom to kind of choose a different path. So I just went on I think the typical path, that the safe path, I would say, that people would normally go on if you want to, yeah, become successful in a certain career. So yeah, I think I've been more like analytical, but now diving more into
Do you think
creative.
it's the yeah, the traditional path? Is it more like the upbringing, the society, schooling that framed you in that, or was it more something more personal? And did the culture in the Netherlands enforce that once you got there?
Uh, well, I think it's maybe also a mentality of, because we have it in our culture, and especially for people going abroad, because there's a sense of yeah, a lot of expectations and hope that people put onto kids and people just moving abroad to study. But I think it's also not necessarily Suriname, but just I would say a mentality of migrant students. You feel like you have this golden opportunity to make it in a big world, or to get something that other people don't really have or can't really access. So you feel the need to do it perfect and to get the most out of it. So you're very, I think, especially hard on yourself, because I don't feel like my parents specifically or my direct family was really like, you must, or you, it's just something you kind of adopt. And then yeah, it's, you don't question it. I think that's the big part. So if I would compare myself to maybe Dutch students or students who grew up in the Western society, they're kind of more free flowing and see a bit more of other routes that you can take. So maybe more creative routes. And I think that's less of an option for migrant students, or it's maybe not, maybe also because we're not introduced to it
Is
as
it changing?
early.
Do you feel there is a change going, a shift
Mm,
going, that it's becoming more, because you're talking, the way you're talking is, it's very familiar, it's very
yeah.
traditional. You mentioned law, medicine, economics.
Hmm.
Basically,
Hmm.
those three studies are, if you do into dive into those fields, you're safe.
Yeah.
If you do
Hmm.
something else, like how are you going to support for yourself after you're done? So
Yes,
so
exactly.
but are you noticing like a shift? Are you seeing that it's becoming more common to go into a
Hmm.
creative field? Do you feel that
Yes.
people that finish high school now in Suriname, or migrants all over the world, they have more opportunity to say to their parents, like, I want to do something different?
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely. I do see a shift, and I think social media has a big impact on that as well, where you can kind of get introduced to different ways of earning money at an early age. You kind of see a lot more on what's happening in the world and what your options are. But also, kind of, I think for migrant students in Suriname, they also get exposed to other countries, so they also see kind of the bigger picture earlier. And I think, just in general, I'm not sure if you guys would agree, but from what I've seen and what I've been noticing, entrepreneurship specifically is kind of m- is making a big come up in just my peer group, but especially the kind of the more, I think it's Gen Z probably, that group is doing a lot of side hustles while they're still working, or starting while they're studying, with selling stuff online, or yeah, anything that they can get their hands on. So I do see a shift, actually. Yeah.
You brought up entrepreneurship, and I want to
Hmm.
bring up this segment. We saved it for a bit later, but this I think this
Hmm.
is the opportune time
Okay.
to bring this in, Chanduk. And to start
Sure,
off,
why
Hmm.
not?
we thought of a segment like overrated, underrated, and we're gonna throw in some
Hmm.
random topics towards you, and you just tell us if you think it's overrated or underrated. And
Okay.
if you have a short explanation, doesn't have to be. Feel free to share. So you mentioned
Hmm.
entrepreneurship, and it
Hmm.
is all the hype now. It's becoming mainstream. So, in your opinion, do you think entrepreneurship is overrated or underrated?
Uh, um,
Don't worry, it's your opinion.
I would say the feeling I get is
Yeah.
that
And
it's off.
properly rated is also an answer, just in case you want to use that now and then. So it's overrated, underrated, or properly
I
rated.
would I would say it's overrated. I would say overrated because I feel like especially if you look at, I don't think entrepreneurship in itself is something that's overrated, but the hype around entrepreneurship at the moment is really kind of a bit in your face. And also I feel like people are kind of ignoring other paths that also might be good to follow as well. So it's almost like um, becoming for instance, as we spoke about being a doctor or becoming, so some paths you can go into as an entrepreneur if you want to, for instance, be in like work for NASA, right? Work on spaceships. That's not something you can just roll into through entrepreneurship. So some roles, and yeah, I think also scientists, and so I think there are many roles and career paths that still need to get valued, and I think we or especially the younger generation, they kind of overvalue the entrepreneurship part and just doing things for yourself, but not really looking at kind of how it contributes to society as a whole. And also being a bit too focused on, okay, I have to do something right now for me and money. And yeah, so I would say overrated. It's a long explanation, sorry.
That's fine. Okay, two more for
Mm,
me. An easy one, and then a more midway one. Then I'll hand it over
mhm.
to Shanluk. Sushi.
Oh, nice one, Diego.
Underrated. Underrated, yeah.
So you
Love
love sushi?
sushi.
Awesome. All right. And
The
the next
price is
one,
overrated, but yeah, sushi's nice.
agreed,
Yeah.
agreed. And the next one, owning a house.
Ooh. Um, I think I'll just go against the grain. I'll say overrated because I think there are other ways also to invest instead of just having your cash fixed in a house that doesn't bring you anything. So yeah, I would say overrated. But if you can afford it, just yeah, go for it. But yeah, that's my
Awesome.
Awesome.
answer.
So it's
Yeah,
my turn. Okay. First one. Fortune 500.
the companies
Yeah. Being listed
overrated.
at okay.
Hmm.
Second one would be Facebook.
Overrated. I'm not on Facebook. Not really at Facebook. No.
Okay, and the last one, a little bit towards your specialization in your studies, decentralized finance.
Poo. Difficult. I'd say overrated in the sense because I think there are many ways to go about it, but I think the investing, the kind of the peer investing in it is a bit overrated at the moment. I hope you guys don't kill me on that one, but I think people are kind of also in Holland. There's now a hype that people use their study, their grants for study to invest in Bitcoin and other
Oh,
coins.
this
So,
is this is not brilliant. Might not
but
be the right term, but yeah, we phrase it as brilliant. Like, it's kind of almost comical indeed.
yeah. So I think yeah, I would say overrated. Yeah.
So one of the because we have some viewers questions as well. Gregory
Hmm.
says like no, DeFi is very underrated. Um, Anil is saying, "How are you guys doing?" I'm actually, if I might be looking away because I'm also watching the stream on Film TV because I just found out that if you do an RTMP stream, the comments from Hive are actually not showing up, but there are people that are watching here on Hive also saying definitely overrated. So that's interesting as well. People on a decentralized platform actually saying that decentralized finance is also a little bit overrated. And
Mm-hmm.
Gregory also has another question because you talked about family earlier. So he wants to
Yeah.
know if there's any relationship to the car business, Hermelijn.
Uh,
And if so, how come you didn't go into the family business?
yeah. So I am related to them, but the Hermelijn family is quite big. So I don't have contact with the Hermelijn family that has the car business.
Okay. So are you satisfied with your answers, Diego?
Oh, Chandel should be satisfied. I'm glad she's bringing
Well,
some hot takes to the table. This, brings up the thinking to people, and it's not that everyone should follow mainstream stuff. And I'm
Mm,
glad she shared some of that and agreed. I do the owning a house thing. I do think that it's overrated at this stage as
mm,
well. So, yeah.
from a utility perspective or from an investment perspective?
If you're okay, short on this, from my
yeah.
take from owning a house, for example, if it's to own a house to live in, it's not an investment. That's a liability at this stage, especially this early. Especially if you
Mm-hmm.
want to, study, travel, and develop your career. Uh, Saving or taking a loan or a mortgage to get a house, I think that's overrated. You can better spend that money. But if you're planning to invest it as real estate to appreciate in value future-wise, it might be an option to look at, but I'd still
Mm-hmm.
hold off of it because of the skyrocketing prices of real estate. But especially for our age group, I'd say it's definitely overrated. Uh,
Okay,
but yeah.
interesting, interesting. Yeah,
You
from
don't
a
agree, Jean-Luc?
the see there. So here's what
Mm-hmm.
happened. COVID really took people back. See, for us is a little
Mm-hmm.
bit different. So one of the things I think that's different from migrant students like ourselves is that when we go to Western countries to study, it's our first like out of the house experience. So
Mm-hmm.
we really don't have a problem with going back to our parents and living there. Like we enjoy it. There's free food. There's a refrigerator stuffed with everything, and your parents are happy that you're still spending time with them. From a
Mm-hmm.
perspective of a Westerner, like most Western, especially in the Netherlands, where people at a young age, when they're 16, they kind of do their things first, out of the house things. When they go to study, they go on to separate rooms. So they're kind of used to not being with their parents. So for them moving back to their parents' house is much more of a big deal than it's for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that perspective, with COVID, it did hurt because for COVID, often going back home is kind of the safe route to go because you're less lonely and you're less conflicted with difficult situations. And for I think and the housing market is insane now in some parts of Europe because of this. Because
Mm-hmm.
all of these people who were like, yeah, I don't need a house. I can roam around, go to another country, do whatever, and then later on in life decide. All of a sudden they're confronted with, wait, I need a home. I need some place I can call home. And then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden the market really keeps moving up. So from that perspective, I
Yeah.
think the context matters. I don't think for everyone. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
as a utility, I think more as a utility, I do think like it's getting properly rated due to COVID.
Mm, yeah.
Fair enough. But let's get back to Chandel. So Chandel, um, yeah, we segue to the entrepreneurship comment, but let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about your experience in the corporate world a bit before we talk more about your entrepreneurial journey now. And
Mm-hmm.
so you've worked straight out of bachelor, straight into a master's, and straight into the workforce in the Netherlands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've
Yes.
actually made it to working for one of the big four companies, as you call it. So could you shortly explain what a big four company is? Like what should you think about and why are they called the big four?
Yeah. So in the corporate environment, there's a lot of companies that provide consulting services. So whenever a company mostly Fortune 500 companies run into problems in anything regarding their business, they oftentimes take on a consulting company to fix the problem or to assist with any shifting changes or things happening. And within that domain, there are four companies that they call the Big Four: KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, and EY. So those are kind of the big accounting firms, and they call it the Big Four. But you also have McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group, which are considered more top tier, more strategic consulting. But you kind of have those two areas where kind of the big the biggest clients get served in the consulting domain.
Yeah, I
So
think that makes some sense. Yeah, Chandel,
I
go
do
ahead.
want to follow up on this because we did
Yeah.
overrated, underrated. So one more overrated, underrated question. Outsourcing, underrated, overrated.
Oh, underrated.
Okay, do elaborate.
Yeah, so I think outsourcing it made a shift, and I did the I think we mentioned it earlier, webinar with Virtuele Handelsmissie about kind of outsourcing towards other countries, and Suriname being one of them. So I think it's underrated because there is a overrated hype towards, for instance, India and some other countries that have been doing this for already 10 plus years. So a lot of IT is being outsourced to India, which is, I think, very uh, um, financial wise a wise decision of many companies. So most companies I've seen through my consulting, they usually outsource their IT to India. So when you within the company have an IT issue, you kind of phone someone from India, and it's like that person is taking over your screen and fixing anything you might have with VPN or some other apps. So I think that's helpful because it's economical for the company, but then also it provides job opportunities in India. And what you see now, because outsourcing has many, you have many ways of kind of outsourcing, right? You can outsource a whole business function like the IT I mentioned, but then also some specific things within your company. And I think it, when done right, when you outsource the right things, it also frees you up to focus more on the core of your business. So if you if you're not an HR specialist, hire an HR company to fix that for you, especially if you're more of a startup. Setting up a whole a business unit just to service five people working there is, yeah, it doesn't make sense. um, and I think there's also kind of a shift happening towards outsourcing, kind of peer-to-peer outsourcing. A lot of people are setting up their own businesses, also going into kind of the um, uh, freelance consulting or freelance anything, freelance businesses. So you do see that more people are kind of making use of that peer-to-peer outsourcing and not necessarily the big companies. So I think that part is definitely underrated, or at least something that's kind of making a big come up. Yeah, so that would be my take on that.
Cool. That's interesting. Yeah, that is
Mhm.
very peer-to-peer, more peer-to-peer rising up
Yeah.
that you can notice. Um, but quickly back to
Mhm.
the big companies, though.
Yes.
So yeah, they outsource a lot. They outsource
Hmm.
big departments and do the consulting and everything. What are
Yes.
some misconceptions that generally people have, and maybe something you've experienced, like going into the company that you've had that thought would be, oh, all rainbows and sunshine, and when you get there, it's like, no, it's not really like that, and something positive and something negative, for example.
Um, Yeah, I think I didn't really know what I would come across in consulting, so I kind of dived into it kind of with an open mind and also eager to learn. I did work prior to that consulting job in for a smaller firm, also in consulting. But then when I jumped into the big four, I was just kind of eager to get more knowledge on, yeah, all the different companies, and also kind of finding my place in in my career. So I think the positive thing of working in consulting would be you really get a kind of a bird's eye view of a specific corporate sector, or just a broader sense of how the corporate world works. You get to see, instead of seeing one company at a time, you see what happens within your consulting firm, but then also you see a broader picture of at the clients, right? So um, that also gives you a sense of how things generally work, and you can just easily kind of make up a bigger picture of what you'd like, or how companies are set up. I think that's the positive side. The negative side, or yeah, I'm not sure if I really have misconceptions, because I really went in with an open mind. I'm not sure what other people's conceptions are of how consulting looks like. So maybe you guys can pitch in and say what your conception is, and I can just see if
Sure.
it's a myth or
Mm.
not. Um,
Let me try paint a picture.
okay.
So,
Yeah.
are you familiar with the television series Suits?
Oh yes, yes, yes.
So when I hear these types of companies, that's something I picture. Like,
Mm,
guys in the suits. You have these tall buildings. We go into the office, stacks of paper. Yeah, you have a meeting. Blah blah blah. And then you have lawsuits here and there. How does that go?
yeah.
Is that something I should picture, or is that just Hollywood flair?
Well, I think there are companies where it's just like Suits, definitely. So, but in the bigger companies, there's kind of a shift, because you have, it's like you have a, it's one company, but there are so many departments with kind of their own cultures and ways of working. So in an IT department, maybe a bit less strict, a bit more casual. So you see people that are kind of just doing their own thing and really laid back and relaxed. The department I worked for was in financial services. So when we went to clients, it was kind of like Suits. So I would just wear my, the Rachel
The suit.
skirt with yeah, the suit, and all my colleagues would also wear their suit. But there was so when I was in consulting, there was some type of a shift happening where people would, and I think that's a good shift, worry less about kind of coming in a suit and having your tie, you know, s- straight, and all of that. So a strategy that would be applied sometimes would be not going with a tie, or sometimes having a bit unbuttoned, just to kind of also show that we're human when we're going to the clients, and also to just make that more human connection with the clients. And that also has to do with the shifts that happen at the clients, because in most companies there's also kind of in my time there was a shift happening towards not just having casual Fridays where you can wear whatever you'd like, but just looking at it more broadly, it's about the knowledge you bring and about the work that you do, and not necessarily on how you dress. um, so at clients, and if it's internal, it makes less sense. But for in consulting specifically, there was, I think, a bit more, and still is a bit more emphasis on it, because you're making first impressions almost all the time. So, and people are hiring you to bring in a professional opinion, and they pay a lot of money. So uh, it does help to also look the part when you go in. So yeah.
That's such a fair answer. But I do have
Mhm.
to ask the question. Uh,
Yeah.
if you did not, have you had situations where you did not wear heels and you were frowned upon for not wearing heels?
Um, uh, so when I started, so you have these courses that you take before you kind of really join the company, and it's kind of like the fundamentals. And one of the topics discussed is also how you need to dress, or how you what would be preferred. So no one really specifically said why aren't you wearing heels, but you do feel a sense of like, okay, she has an off day, or maybe
Judgment.
she's a bit tired, or so yeah, you do sense that. And also if everyone's coming in their suits, and so it's kind of also peer pressure, I think, of keeping it alive. Yeah, but I didn't have
Okay,
any
okay. No, no,
issues
that's fair.
personally. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, how much of a big difference is it when it comes to office politics, working for a big
Oh, office
four compared?
politics, office politics. Yeah. So I must say, office politics. I speak a lot with just peers and friends that are also in the corporate space, and I think one of the biggest turnoffs for people, especially our age, is the office politics part, because you feel like you've studied and you just want to do what you've been studying for and get paid for that. But then comes in the office politics part, and especially in, yeah, I would say in consulting as well. There's kind of an they call it up or out. So either you go up in the chain, or you go out to a different company. So there's a big, it's like a pyramid the way these companies are set up. You have a big base of like junior, senior consultants, and then you go up to manager, and then you go up to partner. And when you're a partner, you actually get equities in the firm. But the higher you go, the less people are on top. So a lot of people go out and go to different companies, which is kind of the natural flow of how things go, because you do oftentimes get paid a lot more once you go to a different company that's not in consulting. So because they also know you're building your CV, and they kind of use that also to pay you less in a sense. So um, but to get on top, there's a lot of things that happen. So aside from the general HR, kind of the normal procedures of having to give feedback and receive feedback, getting evaluations from managers you've worked with, or getting evaluations from clients, you also need to make sure you kind of network within the company well. And also, you can do your work well, but if no one knows you're doing it well, then are you even, doing it well? Or do you even want to get a promotion? So that part, I think, was also difficult for me, kind of, aside from doing the work well, also making sure I show people that I'm doing it well. um, and
So the
that's
politics
something I,
like really
yeah,
matters,
so
and
that's
being
the,
a people person, like actually
y-
socializing
yeah,
professionally, socializing
yeah,
professionally in that sense.
exactly. So, and I must say, in my department, it wasn't as bad, but I did see situations in other departments where people would kind of take the act as if they did something by on their own, and not credit everyone that was involved, just to get a stripe on their chest and to get promoted. So I did notice that. And for myself, I did feel specifically the pressure to get a promotion. uh, uh, that pressure was pretty high back then, where you just feel like, okay, I need to get everything perfect, and you also get a score, so you need to get that. So the pressure is definitely high to
Could you
get
tell
all of
us
that.
about that pressure? And I want to relate this to the burnout topic. So
Mm-hmm.
the common yeah, another misconception maybe from my side. You hear these people work 100, 120 hours in these big consulting firms, and they don't
Yes.
really get paid, especially if you're in the, as you said, the lower chain. That
Yes.
don't necessarily, it doesn't reflect the work you do in that
Mhm.
sense. And then you also have this
Yes.
combining pressure to perform, and so you can get promoted and get higher up in the ladder. How common
Mhm.
is that? And as you said yourself, you had that pressure to get that promotion. How common are
Mhm.
burnouts in such companies? And
Oh, very common. I think many people deal with, and I think maybe people don't really get to burnout because they tap out at the right time or when it gets too much. But people are definitely stressed out a lot and overworked a lot. Um, uh, so I think 120 hours. It differs maybe also per company and per project and the deadlines you're dealing with or the client you're dealing with, how much hours you actually put in. And also, if it's an understaffed project, you just need to put in some extra hours. So, for me personally, it was definitely making 10-hour days almost, yeah, on the regular. But then, if it would be a client, really important client project or a deadline, we would often stay in the office, sometimes together, or sometimes I would just stay on my own until 11 or 12 at night. So we'd order food and then just work until we're finished. So that was not something that it wasn't uncommon that we would make such hours at all. Um, so yeah, that's definitely something that's correct. Yeah.
So where and when came the breaking point for yourself? Do you
Yes.
remember the moment that it kind of it tilted?
Yeah, definitely. So what I mentioned earlier in our conversation is that I kind of was still searching for the actual career path or things that I would like to do for myself. So I started in consulting, kind of really excited and open to learn new things. Started on some strategic projects and also business transformation projects. So any kind of shift in ways of working at clients, we would kind of help them with the implementation. And it was very exciting at first, but I think that the shift for me, because I experienced um, um, definitely being overworked and also being stressed a lot. Um, I wasn't really diagnosed with burnout, so I'm very careful to use that term. But I do think it's a sense of burnout or overworked. But it started happening when I was in the phase of getting my promotion. So I felt a lot of pressure to get things done. I was also on a project that had a lot of hard deadlines that we needed to meet. So making a lot of hours, but then also feeling this pressure of will I get a promotion or not? Because it's almost like a lottery. You know, you have this group of people who are all eligible to make that promotion, but only a few get selected. So I definitely sense the pressure, even though I think from the outside you wouldn't really sense it. But how I knew that I was really affected by just the stress and burden of work was I started getting some um, faster heartbeat, so heart palpitations for a while. And I also went to the doctor for it because I thought it was something that had to do with my health or with something that's related to um, uh, not mentally, just with my
so it
body.
actually impacted you like physically, like
It actually impacted me physically, yeah. And I think around that time was also the first time I experienced somewhat, yeah, I think anxiety attacks. So kind of feeling all of a sudden like um, this extra rush of fear inside your body. You physically feel it. And I've read a lot about it, also experiencing it, kind of trying to understand how it works. And some people really experience kind of like a blackout or just need some time off. But I would just be, you wouldn't notice it from the outside, but from the inside, I would just have a moment where it's like your mind and body is a bit out of control. um, or it's almost kind of like you've been running a couple of miles and you're sitting down and you're kind of catching your breath, but you haven't done anything physical. So that's kind of the experience I had, and it wasn't a constant thing. It kind of came up and went down, came up and went down. So I didn't really diagnose it as anxiety attacks or being overworked or stressed until it happened for a couple of months. And then I was kind of like, okay, I think something's really wrong with me, and I need to get it checked or get some help for it. Yeah.
So how do you actually, if you have to, based on your experience and
Hmm.
someone maybe going through this,
Yes.
okay, first, what's the experience generally before this point? Worth it to you? Would you do anything different
Hmm.
before, or was it foundational to the change you're doing now? Because we're shifting to the change a bit now.
Hmm.
Would you do anything different before that breaking point? If you look back.
Before that breaking point, I think I just wasn't aware at all. I also had a sense, and I think many people have that sense that you feel kind of invincible and or feel like a burnout or things in that nature. You're not susceptible to it. I definitely felt that way because I did see people around me that had, were in those situations, and I just couldn't identify with it, and I also couldn't really understand how you kind of lose control of your mind and body. You get kind of disconnected. I couldn't understand how that happened. So it was also kind of hard to accept the fact that I had to go through that, and that I was dealing with it. But I think prior to it, I really wasn't aware. So with the knowledge I have now, I probably would have slowed down, or at least I the awareness itself would have already helped me to slow it down in my head. But yeah, I think it needed to happen for me to kind of gain perspective on some things. So yeah.
So, interesting question by Anil, which
Hmm.
is, how did the company help you to cope with the stress? How much were they aware, and to what
Hmm.
extent did they help you out?
Yeah, I they weren't really aware because I myself was kind of I had it was like an internal struggle or battle I was fighting. And I did have a you do have kind of a manager with who you speak to on a regular and ask, yeah, they ask how it goes. And but you feel like everyone's in that position, everyone's kind of stressed out, and you also notice kind of everyone's a bit stressed out, so the stress is kind of normalized. But I think people, and myself included, don't really address it until it's kind of too late. And that's exactly what happened with me, because I didn't really recognize the difference between being stressed versus really having to take a break and slow it down. Yeah.
So, one more over under question,
Mm.
because I saw that you follow Brene Brown. So,
Oh.
vulnerability, underrated or overrated?
Underrated. Definitely underrated. Yeah.
Okay, so after that, you decided to make a change for yourself while making changes for others. So, how did the
Yes.
entrepreneurial journey start for you?
Yeah, so it ties in with my experience of being stressed and overworked. Uh, I think the underlying kind of trigger of feeling that way was me also kind of finding my place and also not really being secure in what I wanted to actually do in my career. So um, when you have to make all those hours and do stuff that you don't necessarily get any energy from or any satisfaction from, it it has a, I think you get overworked even easier, and that was the case for me because the types of projects that I used to do were more related to. In the beginning, it was more like business transformation type of work, the work I'm also doing right now, and more strategic consulting. But then it shifted a bit more towards also regulatory changes and operational risk, and that's creating a lot of reports and not really being connected with the actual client. So I missed the connection. I was just behind my laptop a lot, making reports, and that really didn't give me the energy I wanted. So because of that shift, I also felt the need to try something else. So the first idea was to make a shift in within the company itself to a different department. Um, but yeah, that wouldn't really change a lot. So that's why I decided, and I think it took me a while to make that decision because I needed to gather the courage to quit, because I quit the job without actually having anything lined up, which was seems small right now when I talk about it just years later, but at the moment it was really scary because you feel like yeah, we mentioned I kind of followed the typical path, the path with least resistance, the risk-free path, so this was really out of my comfort zone, and I think also out of the comfort zone of people I surrounded myself with, especially at my work. um, Everyone I used to speak to was like, "Are you crazy? Why would you quit? And how come you don't have anything lined up? What are you going to do? What if you don't find a job at all? What if you go homeless?" So it was also kind of calming myself down to not think about those scenarios of yeah,
So
becoming.
quickly on that, you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's either up or out. So was going to
Mm.
another big company not an option, or
Yeah,
didn't
so
you
I
just want
did
that environment anymore? Yeah.
I did explore it, right? So I did start with applying to some jobs, but then I'm not sure what triggered me, but I know the choice to kind of work for myself was more based on knowing myself. Knew I needed kind of a some time to think through what my next steps would be, but then also I knew I wanted to go into change management because that's something that I've been doing for a while, but also that I wanted to kind of deep dive in a bit more. Um, and then I could do that in within a company, within another consulting firm, or within a larger company, just like an in-house consultant. Those were my options, but I also know myself and know that once I commit myself to a company or to a project or to anything, I'm kind of like, I'm there. And if it wouldn't really be something I would like, I would still kind of push through to see if it's actually something I really don't want or do want. So going the route of yeah, getting projects for myself was the best way to go about it, because then you have more flexibility to also say, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I'm stopping with the engagement right now, and it's also shorter term, so I know, okay, there's a specific end date, and after that I can evaluate for myself and decide what I want to do next. So yeah, that's kind
S-
of.
So we have to ask the question: did you make a risk analysis to figure out if it was worth the risk to start on your own?
Oh, I had so many lists, and I had a pros and cons list. I even tried to make like a rating of all the different scenarios. So all mostly I was focused, I think, a bit too much on negative side in hindsight, kind of making sure I don't go broke and become homeless and have to go back to my home and stay with my parents or something like that. So I was really focused on making sure I don't don't end up on the street. Or yeah, that's an extreme scenario thinking about it now, but in that moment it felt like a really realistic scenario, just not being able to find a job and being hopeless. But I definitely, yeah, I made a lot of lists. I had a lot, I spoke to a lot of people, but also blocked out a lot of people. So not necessarily not speaking to them, but kind of choosing what I share and don't share with them. And also at work, I really needed to kind of block out what people said, because all they said was kind of pushing on their own fears on me, right? So it really felt heavy, and it felt realistic that if I didn't have a plan, I would fail. So I also listened to a lot of podcasts to kind of get some inspiration from other people that did the same. So yeah, that helps.
Awesome. I have one more question,
Hmm.
and it's about scaling. So when you look at
Mm,
your own business now,
yes.
uh, and looking like along the lines or in a couple of years,
Hmm.
uh, how big do you want to scale your own business?
Um, I'm not sure how big I would like to scale it. I do, of course, have some ideas and a vision for my company. And I'm at the point right now. So it's been 2.5 years since I started. And in that time, can you guys still hear me? I see my screen is
Your audio
blocked
is
out. Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Your
My
audio
audio
is
is fine.
fine.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So I do have the vision. I do have ideas on it. And it's been 2.5 years since I started uh, with the company. And I feel, or I know I'm now at the point where I really need to kind of scale up towards hiring some people. I've been working with some other people that also work for themselves, but I don't have anyone actually employed or partially employed. And that's something I am looking at, because I'm doing everything right now on my own. So my marketing, but then also just some general administrative tasks, but also within projects, because uh, the the projects that I do are really broad. So uh, I would like to lean more towards kind of managing everything, but that happens, but not necessarily creating all the documentation that's needed for those projects. So yeah, I'm looking to scale up. How big? I'm not really sure yet. I'd rather take it step by step, and I still have my bigger vision, but yeah, let's see how it goes.
What's the bigger vision?
The bigger vision, yeah. So I'm still focused. So with Change Go, what I'm doing right now is providing support to companies that are going through business transformation. So all types of business transformations, be it an IT implementation, new processes, new ways of working, or maybe even a reorganization. I then jump in to help with specifically change management. Sometimes it also links with project management, so ensuring that the whole change project goes well. But my main focus is on the change management part. And uh, change management in itself is kind of like a small project within a project, because it's focusing on the people side of things, and that's something I still would like to keep doing. um, but there are also some tasks that a more I think a more junior person would be able to handle. So I would like to bring on someone else. That's kind of the first step. Someone else that's in a more junior role, maybe with some prior experience, but someone that can just also assist in the project, and someone I can train and help get on board, and that can get running. But then what I would also like to shift towards, and that's kind of been my passion also since working in the consulting firm, focusing more on the future of work and the future of uh, the new generations within the working world, because they're we kind of touched on it in this podcast episode as well. There's kind of a shift happening within the new generations and the current corporate world. There's kind of like a mismatch. And in HR, they call it the war on talent, because there's like kind of a mini war to get new talent and young talent within companies. So companies are doing weird stuff, man. They're doing all types of yeah, things on TikTok, and then internally having maybe cool coffee corners or hip stuff, just to get people in the company. But what I'm noticing is they're not really changing the actual work and what's valued within work. So you still have the traditional corporate structure. You still have the kind of the workspace politics. So it's essentially the same thing, but then in a different suit. So
They
um,
they try to give it a cheat code.
yeah, yeah. So, and there's really also just the older generation just does not understand, I think, our generation, but then also the even younger generation. So I would like to kind of bring those two generations together, or kind of build a
Basically,
bridge
a
to.
generational bridge.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a generational gap. So that's something I'm also kind of focusing on, and it's very much linked to change management, but it's, I think, a more of a specialization where I would like to work towards with ChangeGo, and maybe I'll do it under a different brand name. I do have some ideas on that. But that's something I that's definitely in the vision of ChangeGo. And yeah, if that goes well, I would just like to keep scaling up and adding more people to the company. But I think the main part now is just getting that vision clear and ensuring that I have some just general solutions on the shelf that I can sell to companies to help them with those changes. So yeah.
I actually have so many more questions right now, but I'm going to
Oh,
go to Gianos first, and then I'm just going to ask you one more question
okay.
because then we'll wrap it up. So Gianos'
Yeah.
question from the comments is, first of all, greetings from Curacao, Bonochi. Thanks for
Hey,
sharing,
Manoj.
Chandel. He does have a question. If you could give a 17 or 18-year-old some advice about your academic and career choice, what advice would it be?
Mm, that's a good question. I think it's different for everyone, but I would say to kind of explore a bit more. To yes, be focused on the academic side. I do still believe it can bring value and stability, and also allowed me to kind of make the shift, because it's kind of a foundation I can fall back on. If things don't go well, but that won't happen. So that's not something I plan on. Well, actually, my current career is kind of also based on my career, on my academic studies. So yeah, but I would say to still know that the your academic studies are important, to still focus on that part, but then also exploring other opportunities. I think there's also um, uh, it's maybe kind of a hype to also take a gap year, but I think it does make a lot of sense, the gap year, because it provides people with the opportunity, students, to just kind of explore a bit more on what they want. And I think there's two ways to do a gap year. One way is kind of to live your best life and travel and party and just, and then come back and just be like, oh shoot, I'm not even sure what I want. But there's also a good way to do it, and that's really focusing in on, okay, these are my possibilities, and maybe start with what you don't want, and then go into what you do want. And I think what also helps is to get really practical experience from people, because especially when you're 18, you don't really have a lot of experience of how the real world works, especially the working world. So getting insight and speaking to people who actually do the work, I think, will really help you to make a choice. So um, yeah, I would say those stuff. And I think parents also play an important role. So um, I think there's not enough emphasis on kind of giving your child more freedom to explore all those different opportunities. Uh, it also had to do with, of course, for our parents, for instance, it was a different time. So they taught us what they knew was best in their time. But then things kind of shifted, and there are many opportunities. But I think if we're kind of in the age where we're becoming parents. We're not parents yet, Diego and me, but Shanbuk, you are. So if we can just instill that in our children and in any other young kids or nieces or nephews that we speak to, then I think that'll help them as well.
I think that's a
That's a
great way
damn good
to,
answer.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
No.
great way to sum it up. I hope you're satisfied with that, Giano. And I saw Shanduk laughing the part where you mentioned, you can take the gap year and go partying. I
Yeah, yeah.
specifically saw you laughing at that part, Shanduk. Did you do that?
No.
Sorry?
Oops.
The part about the partying during the gap year.
No,
I
so
saw.
I want to quickly clarify that. Like now you gave two options. I'm familiar with the second one because I took a gap year because I was 17 and I didn't want to have like
Mhm.
somebody have custody over me overseas who was not my one of my
Mm,
parents. So I think
yes.
that was a big reason for me why I took a gap year. In my gap year,
Mm,
I worked different jobs. I had ended up at a
mhm,
television station, one of the coolest
mhm.
jobs I had. So I worked four different jobs within a year.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so I got a lot of experience. I didn't live with my parents. I lived with my one of my best friends. So we really had
Oh,
our own
nice.
chores at home and everything. But the first option you mentioned,
Mhm.
going all out partying, traveling, with whose money are you doing that?
Exactly. Yeah, maybe that's something. It's a choice for rich kids, but you do see that kind of coming up. A lot of people are doing that. So,
Well,
yeah.
if your parents will provide you to go on a, I mean, that for me, I would have taken that gap year after I graduated or I got in my
Yeah.
master's. That's
Mhm.
something I considered, and then I would have to actually. So I did consider traveling the world and
Mhm.
working in those different countries. So applying for like minimum wage jobs just to get around or have enough money to travel the world. That came up. Actually, one of my friends or two of my friends did that, but
Yeah.
after
Back.
high school, like you need very wealthy parents to be able to do that. So I think that's why Diego and I were laughing. I think he was laughing like, "Did you do that?" I was like laughing like, "Who are gonna provide?" My parents? No, they were not gonna provide for that
They were like,
lifestyle.
nope. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying. So to close us off, Chandel, final question
Mhm.
from me to you is: how would you describe Chandel in 2 words?
Ooh. In 2 words, I think that's difficult. Um,
While you're thinking about that,
yeah.
Giano, he loved the answer and appreciate that.
Uh, yeah, it's always difficult to talk about yourself and to kind of describe yourself. Also, when I have like uh, it's like a job interview, but for different projects I have and clients I come across, I kind of also need to talk about myself, and I always have difficulties with it. But if I would describe myself in 2 words, I would say. Um,
And of course, that this could change over the years as you're
yeah,
so familiar with change.
it probably
He's
has.
Diego is sneaking in these tough questions at the end. I don't know.
Yes,
He has
yes.
been doing that for a couple of weeks now, and our guests have been struggling a little bit.
They're struggling with it. Yeah. But if I would take it with a kind of a pinch of salt and kind of lighthearted, I would say funny, because I always, when I crack jokes, I always need to laugh at myself. So that's probably one of them. I would say I'm funny. I don't know if everyone agrees, but and then the second one would be, I would think I'm um yeah, what would the other, I would say, Yeah, it's difficult because I was gonna say outgoing because I do like to meet new people, but then again, I also have a side of me that's more like an introvert where I don't want to see people at all. So, but yeah, let's just go with those two.
All right.
Uh, yeah.
Funny, outgoing introvert.
Okay, three. Yeah.
No, no, no. That's great.
Okay.
I thought to end
If
it on
I
a
may
light
do
note,
a
but
Yeah, if I
yeah,
do may a
Jean-Luc,
final question,
exactly.
because
Mhm,
we've been streaming on Film TV, and Diego, there's a question from Unc about what kind of equipment we use for recording the show. So maybe we should just answer that one on Hive itself. But also a follow-up question, because we talked about the younger generation advising 17, 18-year-olds. So what
mhm.
advice would you give to somebody who has always done manual labor and is now ready to make a career shift? Is there anything in particular that you
Towards
came across towards that you say, like, somebody with a lot of experience, like manual labor experience, what kind of career would be fitting for them in this day and age?
when you mean manual labor, you mean, can you give an example? So you really mean like working on the fields or in a factory?
In a factory, a truck driver, something that's really like
Mm,
you're based on your real life skill handling
mm-hmm.
stuff, compared to the Gen Z who kind of does that
It's
in 3D online.
oh yeah. Making a shift.
So I'll give, if you want me to frame
Yeah.
it,
Mm-hmm.
let me frame it with an example. Like, one of the
Okay.
things is like telephone companies. So
Mm,
there are a lot of people working for telephone companies who are
mm-hmm.
like real manual labor workers who put out the lines for the telephone, the cable lines for telephone.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you have this company that's all moving to mobile, everything is fully wireless, and basically there's no cables to be later on anymore, because
Mm-hmm.
everything
Mm-hmm.
goes to 5G and other wireless
Yes.
things. And they haven't been the company has, I wouldn't say failed, but the company has not been able to kind of re-educate all of the
Exactly.
personnel. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody like that says, like, maybe it's time for me to do a career change, what kind of
Yes.
career would you consider that would be a
Ooh.
good a choice?
And you're
Yeah.
telling me
So
that I'm asking a difficult question.
no, but I think so if you're in that situation, from my experience or what I've seen other people do, it's important to also go on a journey to identify, I don't want to say self-discovery or those typical words, but I do think it's important to have a good objective view of what your strengths and weaknesses are. So maybe speaking to people around you to grasp, or maybe first ask yourself. I think journaling also helped me. So writing things out and being still with yourself to identify, okay, what do I actually enjoy? I've been putting out these cables, doing this manual work. Which elements of this work did I enjoy? Which didn't I enjoy? And aside from that, what are other things, maybe not within work, but within my personal space that I enjoy doing? Do I enjoy talking to people a lot? Do I give them advice, or do I like cooking, or do I like so? If you identify those things, you can also kind of make a plan to shift. In some cases, I would say yes, it can help to get an education, or even just a smaller training, or something like that. But maybe it's not needed, because and that's something that's not new to you guys, being social entrepreneurs. But there's a lot of also opportunities in just filming what you're good at. So if you're good at cooking, filming it and putting it online is something that can really already help. Um, or if you're good at, the electrics and laying cables, maybe you can apply that knowledge to just the general things that people can do around the house themselves and make tutorials, and then see if you can go on that path. So um, it all depends on what you would like and what you're good at and would enjoy. That's the basis, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. and my camera just lasts exactly for an episode, and that's a sign to wrap it up. But Chandel,
Let's go.
Chandel, we loved hearing your perspective, especially on change. Change is big thing. There's this saying: the only constant is change, basically.
Yes.
And we got some comments as we close this off from Michael from YouTube. Great stuff. Biggest takeaway for me is there's a life after corporate. And from your friend Sandrina, now Beverde Kunsel, who was on here a few weeks
Yes.
ago. Awesome conpost, guys. Very inspiring and insightful. And Sandrina, congratulations.
Yes.
Um, but with that being said, we really appreciate you sharing that with us, coming on Social Confoes. To close it off, where can people find you? Where can people reach out to Change Co? And what can people expect from you?
Yeah, so personally I'm more on Instagram at chandel.h. That's my screen name. And then and professionally on LinkedIn. I'm not really on Facebook a lot, so I don't think that's really the right place to connect with me. So those two channels are the channels I have at the moment. I also have a business page for Change Go on LinkedIn, and also on Instagram as well. So both of them are, I think, if you search Change Co Consultancy, then you can find them easily. And what they can expect from me, uh, I plan on sharing just more general knowledge on the work that I'm doing, because I think there are a lot of um, misconceptions on change management, or just things people have questions about. And that's something I would like to just contribute and just share online. And then also the part that we discussed around just bridging the gap between the generations on the workforce. That's something that I'll also be focusing on. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, or if you would just like to connect on a more personal level, Jen, yeah, please reach out.
Awesome. We'll link those in the episode show notes as well. This episode will be released on Saturday on the podcasting platforms as usual. If you guys have feedback for us, send it our way. We love reading feedback. And with that being said, Shanluk,
Well, thank you all for watching. Chandel, thank you so much for being our guest. This was Social Confos. See you next Tuesday, same time, same place. See you. Bye
Yes.
bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye bye.